Kayla thought her life had already hit rock bottom, debts piling up, a crying baby on her hip, and counting her last coins at a gas station. Then Elon Musk stepped into her world, and everything seemed to take a wild turn. But instead of a miracle, she faced a test that could break even the toughest. And that's where the real story begins. The gas station sat on the side of a bustling Los Angeles highway, looking like it had been forgotten by time and good taste, the kind of place you only stop at when you have no other choice. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink that made the grimy neon sign of the station flicker even more pathetically. Cars zipped by in the background, their headlights starting to cut through the dimming light. Standing by one of the pumps was Kayla Watson, 27, looking like she'd been through a war, or at least a very long, very bad day. She held a beat-up old wallet in one hand and balanced her squirming, crying 7-month-old son, Elliot, in the other. Her dark curls clung to her forehead in sticky strands, and her eyes darted nervously around, as if she were hoping no one would notice her. Spoiler, they did. Kayla was doing the math, and it wasn't adding up. She was down to her last handful of coins, trying to figure out how much gas she could get without completely emptying her wallet. Her hands trembled as she counted, each clink of the coins sounding louder than it should. The kind of loud that makes you feel like the whole world is watching you fail. Over at the next pump, a guy in a slick suit, the type who looked like he paid extra for his smirk, leaned against his car. A fat cigar dangled from his fingers as he watched her, amused. "Don't bother, sweetheart," he called out, loud enough to make her wince. "Looks like you'd barely get a whiff of gas with that change." Kayla flinched, almost dropping her coins. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't look at him. She couldn't afford to. Elliot let out another wail, a piercing sound that echoed across the lot. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she focused on counting, her lips moving silently as she whispered the numbers like a prayer. Then, a sleek black Tesla pulled into the station, humming so quietly it was like it wasn't even there. The driver stepped out, a man in jeans and a plain t-shirt, the kind of outfit that made you think he might be just another regular guy. Except he wasn't. The slight air of exhaustion clung to him, but there was something sharp in his eyes. It wasn't until he moved closer to the pumps that the faint glow of the overhead light hit his face, and you realized this wasn't just anyone. It was Elon Musk. Elon glanced around, his gaze landing on Kayla. He paused, the corners of his mouth twitching slightly, as if he were trying to figure out if what he was seeing was real. A woman on the verge of tears, a baby in meltdown mode, and a guy with a cigar laughing at the whole scene. It was like the setup to a bad movie. But something about Kayla held his attention. Maybe it was the way she stood, defiant even as the weight of the world seemed ready to crush her. Kayla finally scraped together her courage and shuffled to the counter, dumping the coins onto the scratched surface. The cashier, a guy who looked like he'd seen enough of humanity to hate it, raised an eyebrow. "I'll pay you back," Kayla said, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry her desperation. "I just need enough gas to get home." The cashier snorted, not even bothering to pretend sympathy. "Pay now or move your car," he said flatly, crossing his arms like a gatekeeper to her last shred of dignity. Kayla's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. Crying wouldn't solve anything. Elliot, meanwhile, decided now was the perfect time to crank his screaming up to 11. She jiggled him on her hip, trying to calm him down, but it was no use. The humiliation was suffocating. That's when Elon stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "How much is her gas?" Kayla turned, startled. Her eyes met his, and for a second, she thought she'd imagined him. The cashier's expression changed instantly, recognition flashing across his face. He stammered, finally blurting out the amount. Elon nodded. "And add whatever she needs for the baby," he said, his tone casual, like he was ordering a coffee. Kayla's jaw dropped. I can't accept that," she started, but Elon just held up a hand, silencing her. "Sometimes," he said, his voice calm and unshakable, "all it takes is a little luck." Without another word, he handed the cashier his card, completed the transaction, and walked back to his car. Kayla stood there, stunned, clutching Elliot like he might vanish if she let go. Elon climbed back into his Tesla, the door closing with a soft click, and drove off into the growing night. It was as if he'd never been there, leaving Kayla with a full tank, a cart of supplies, and a head full of questions. The morning sunlight spilled through Kayla's apartment window, but it didn't bring much warmth. Her place was still a mess, half-packed boxes from the last time she thought she'd have to move, a pile of overdue bills on the kitchen counter, and the ever-present hum of uncertainty hanging in the air. But today was different. Today, she had a shot. Maybe her only shot. Kayla dressed as best she could with what she had, a blazer that didn't quite fit, and a pair of scuffed black flats. "Fake it till you make it," she muttered to herself in the mirror, smoothing her curls and trying to ignore the nerves twisting her stomach into knots. Elliot was with her neighbor, who had graciously agreed to babysit for a couple of hours. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The address for the interview led her to a sleek, glass-walled building downtown, the kind of place that screamed money from every reflective surface. Kayla hesitated in the lobby, clutching her portfolio like a lifeline. Her palms were sweaty, and she had to remind herself to breathe. "It's just a job interview," she whispered. "What's the worst that can happen?" She checked in with the receptionist, who gave her a once-over that bordered on judgmental, and was quickly escorted to a conference room on the 23rd floor. The room was massive, with a long, imposing table in the center. Kayla took a seat, trying to calm the pounding in her chest. Then the door opened. Her stomach dropped. Walking in, as smug as ever, was the same guy from the gas station, the one with the suit and the cigar. Except now, the cigar was gone, replaced by a tablet and an air of self-importance that could fill the room. His name tag read Simon Brooks, and the logo beneath it was unmistakable, a branch of Tesla's corporate empire. "Well, well," Simon said, taking a seat across from her with the kind of grin that made her skin crawl. "You again. Small world, huh?" Kayla's brain froze. What were the odds? Of all the people in the world, it had to be him. Yeah, she managed, forcing a polite smile that felt like it might crack her face. "Small world." Simon wasted no time. "Elon Musk himself flagged your application," he said, flipping through her resume on the tablet. "Said you've got potential. Let's see if that's true." The interview started off fine. Standard questions about her experience, her skills, her goals. Kayla answered as confidently as she could, even though she knew her resume wasn't exactly impressive. She'd spent the last few years juggling odd jobs and raising Elliot, not exactly the career ladder most companies were looking for. But then things took a turn. Simon leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "So tell me," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm, "what makes you think you deserve this job? Because, let's be honest, getting a recommendation from Elon doesn't mean much if you can't back it up." Kayla blinked, caught off guard. I've worked hard to..." "Worked hard?" Simon interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "Harder than the hundreds of other applicants who didn't get a personal shout-out from the boss? I doubt it." His words hit like a slap, but Kayla refused to let him see her flinch. Instead, she straightened her back, her voice steady. "I know my background isn't perfect," she said, meeting his gaze, "but I'm here because I want to prove myself. I'm not asking for a handout. I just need a chance." Simon smirked, clearly enjoying himself. "That's a nice speech," he said, tapping his pen against the table. "But speeches don't pay the bills, do they? Let me ask you this. If Elon hadn't stepped in, do you think you'd even be sitting here right now?" The question hung in the air like a bad smell. Kayla's hands clenched under the table, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to tell him off, to storm out and never look back. But instead, she took a deep breath, her voice calm and firm. "It doesn't matter why I'm here," she said. "What matters is what I do with the opportunity. And if you're looking for someone who won't give up, someone who'll work harder than anyone else in the room, then yes, I deserve to be here." For the first time, Simon hesitated. His smirk faltered just for a moment before he recovered. "We'll see about that," he said, rising from his chair. "We'll be in touch." Kayla stood, shaking his hand even though she didn't want to. "Thank you for your time," she said, her voice steady, even as her heart raced. As she walked out of the building, the adrenaline started to fade, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. Had she just blown her one chance? Or had she said exactly what she needed to? Only time would tell. Days turned into what felt like weeks for Kayla. The waiting was the worst part, staring at her phone, jumping at every notification, only to see it was nothing but spam or reminders about bills she couldn't pay. The silence from the interview felt like a slow rejection. And the pile of debt? That was like a dark cloud that followed her everywhere. But there was one thing that kept her going: Elliot. His giggles as he played with his favorite stuffed toy were the only bright spots in her increasingly dim days. Whenever she felt like she was at the end of her rope, she'd look at him and remind herself, "You can't give up. Not now, not ever." It was a late afternoon when it happened. Kayla was trudging back to her apartment, her grocery bag filled with the bare minimum to stretch her budget. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over her rundown neighborhood. As she approached her building, something unusual caught her eye: a shiny black Tesla parked at the curb. Her steps slowed as she squinted, trying to figure out what a car like that was doing in a place like this. Then she saw him. Elon Musk, casually leaning against the railing of her porch, deep in conversation with her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Henderson looked like she was having the time of her life, chatting animatedly while Elon nodded politely, a small smile playing on his lips. When he spotted Kayla, he gave a slight wave, motioning her over. Her heart skipped a beat. "Kayla," he said, his tone warm but matter-of-fact. "I hope I'm not intruding." She shook her head, still trying to process what was happening. "Not at all," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Elon stepped down from the porch, his hands in his pockets. "I heard about your interview," he began, tilting his head slightly. "It didn't go as planned, did it?" Kayla opened her mouth to explain, to defend herself, but he held up a hand to stop her. "It's okay," he said. "What's important isn't how it went. What matters is that you showed up. You didn't give up." She blinked, caught off guard by his words. I didn't know what else to do," she admitted. "It felt like my last chance." Elon smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "Sometimes last chances are the ones that matter most." He gestured for her to sit on the porch steps, and she did, still clutching her grocery bag like a shield. Elon sat beside her, his expression thoughtful. "I want to tell you about something I've been working on," he said. "It's an idea I've had for a while, a project to support single mothers who are dealing with impossible odds." Kayla furrowed her brow, unsure where he was going with this. "Okay," she said slowly, her curiosity piqued. "I've seen people like you. People who have the drive and determination to make a difference but are held back by circumstances beyond their control," he continued. "You've got a perspective that most people in corporate offices can't even begin to understand. That's why I want you to be a part of this project. Not just as a participant, but as a leader." Her breath caught. "Wait, what?" she stammered, staring at him like he'd just said she'd won the lottery. Elon's smile widened. "You see things that others don't. You've lived it. I need someone like you to help build this initiative, to make it real for the people who need it most." Kayla's mind raced. Was this real? Could she even do something like that? She thought about everything she'd been through, the struggles, the heartbreak, the moments when she'd felt like giving up. And then she thought about Elliot. If there was ever a reason to take a leap of faith, it was him. I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice shaky. "Say yes," Elon said simply, "and let's change the game." Kayla felt a tear slip down her cheek, but this time it wasn't from despair. It was hope. Pure, unfiltered hope. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, I'm in." From that day on, everything changed. Kayla threw herself into the project, working harder than she ever had before. She met with other single mothers, heard their stories, and helped design programs that addressed their needs. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was making a difference, not just for herself, but for others who were walking the same rocky path. Elliot grew up watching his mother transform into a force to be reckoned with. His laughter filled their small apartment, now a place of hope instead of struggle. And Kayla? She proved to herself and the world that fate wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you took into your own hands and reshaped into something better. What would you have done in Elon's place? Do you think his decision was the right one? Share your thoughts and let us know if you or someone you know has faced similar challenges. Leave a comment, give this story a like, and join the conversation. This story was created to highlight real-life struggles and inspire kindness and action. Together, we can shine a light on these issues and work toward a better world. Your opinion matters, and your voice can make a difference. Let's keep the conversation going.